Hey folks, my name's Rene Enriquez and you are watching Uncensored.
This is Rene Enriquez. Nickname Bootser. Black Hand of the Mexican Mafia. Prison gang politics.
Hey folks, my name's Rene Enriquez and you are watching Uncensored. Well, remember we did two segments on it, my debrief, my story, and I wanted to give it to you straight from me. So if you just come into the channel and you've never seen anything else, this was me when I was flown down from Pelican Bay State Prison in 2002. They flew me here to Walnut, California, and they took me in this eye room right here. Well, I actually lived here for about 13 months on one occasion and an extended period on another occasion, but this is where they would bring me. They flew me down from Pelican Bay State Prison after I dropped out, and this is the CDC actually debriefing me. So I wanted to show you what the debrief entailed, and this is the real deal. You know, other people have posted this video, but they've never had it with my commentary, and I thought that, you know, I post everybody else's debrief, right? If I get it, I post it because I want to show you, like, what the life entails. It's not done to shame anybody or to out anybody, none of those things, right? This is just a peek at the life that nobody really gets to see. Nobody ever really goes behind the scenes. You know, you hear, oh, he dropped out, he debriefed, and nobody knows what that means. There's so many definitions of what that means out there, right? But I wanted to show you what I had to go through. And not just one time, but dozens of times. I mean, this is a never-ending debrief that just went on and on because every agency that you cooperate with requires a proper session or a debrief. And that's really what it is. You get up there and you tell everything you know, and that's what it is. So for each agency that I worked with, FBI, ATF, DEA, U.S. Attorney's Office, District Attorney's Office, Sheriff's, LAPD, I will do a debrief because they wanted their own set of information that they worked from, and then they fit you into a case or they didn't, right? Or they were doing independent cooperation on other facts they had, and that's what debriefs actually do. Say I debrief here in whatever state I'm living in, and then somebody debriefs in California. My debrief contains certain information that could be corroborated by that individual in California. Or say there's a guy in Washington who debriefs as well. And all three sources say that on the 33rd of February, an apple fell from the sky. That's called independent corroboration. And that's one of the purposes of debrief, not just to divest yourself from gang involvement, but to also corroborate intelligence that they've received from a number of different sources, right? So that's one of the purposes of debriefs. Like I said, somebody else put this up years ago. It was leaked out. Like anything you see previous to me coming on YouTube was leaked out by cops. The cops give it to somebody. Cops, you know, thought they were cool, you know, leaking out my information. Because this is all supposed to be confidential. There's an agreement in place. This was done for the CDC. My debrief was never supposed to see the light of day. And lo and behold, a couple years later, a cop leaks it out and it goes up on YouTube. Somebody tried to actually copyright this because it got so many views, right? And then they little slick move of trying to put music in it that couldn't be heard, right? Of some kind of digital embedding of something which prevented me from using my own debrief. So thanks to a little bit of research, we were able to clean that up and get it up, right? So we got parts of this, right? And this is for one agency. This is like the initial debrief. This is it. And I have run two previous segments with Lieutenant Madrid. You'll hear him in here. This is Lieutenant Ernie Madrid, who's now retired from the CDCR. He's the one asking the questions. And we're going to continue right where we left off. So let's get with it. Let's listen to the debrief, and we'll unpack it as we go along, and I hope it's better than just a video playing, because That's what's been up for years, at least 10 years. I've seen this. A number of different people have posted it. Like I said, for whatever reason, I've seen a lot of my videos posted, and I thought that just unpacking it with you and going through it with you step by step, like tell you how I'm feeling, what this means or whatever. We'll decipher this as we go along. All right, folks, let's listen to the video.
But individuals do take out these communications on a frequent basis, and they deliver them specifically and directly to the individual intended. So I can communicate with any individual on the streets with a parolee.
I think that we left off and we're talking about keister stashing, right? And we all know what that is. You stick something up your butt. And we're talking about a manner of communication here, right? Like we get kites out. Well, guys, paroling. That's what we're actually talking about right here.
Delivering the message. Or he can do it verbally. It's done this way as well. But most of the time, for authentication and verification, you write it in your own hand, so the person you're seeing, the person sees it in your hand and understands that you wrote it. It came out of Pelican Bay.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the nature of the violence of the Mexican Mafia. Rene, are you aware of them doing murders?
I in my debrief, I made a list of all the murders that I was aware of, and there are over 70 murders that I was aware of, and I'm positive I'm forgetting a couple dozen, at least, just in my career that I was told about, that I knew about, that I may have participated in some of these murders as well. I'd like to refrain from specific discussions on personal involvement, but I was involved in some of these crimes.
Yeah, I made that clarification right there. I had the understanding that there's no statute of limitations on murders, right? As does like you'll see Mundo do this all the time. Like, hey, there's statute of limitations. I can't talk about that. But we can dance around this topic, and that's exactly what I'm going to do, right? Because in your initial debrief, you write down everything in a piece of paper, right? It's like it's called a bio, and you list everything, like what your gang moniker was, how old were you when you got in, what were your homeboys' names that jumped you in, and you go on and on and on until you get to the really gritty stuff, like eliminations, right? And that's what they want to talk about here, and I'm cognizant enough, and I'm intelligent enough to know, like, you're sitting in front of a camera. This is never going to go away. So be very careful about how you speak, right? And that's what I'm doing here. And that's really one of the things that I had to face down at the board. Not my convictions. Not the convictions that I had, the 2 eliminations, the conspiracy to commit. Those weren't really the problem. It's this silent stuff that sat in the background that was in my confidential file that everybody heard about, that people made up, right? All these different, the insinuation that I was involved in a lot more than I'd ever been convicted of. And it was the truth. It was the truth. That's the real battle at the board, what was at the board for me. So I'm also thinking, like, man, if I ever think I'm going to get out, or if I'm ever going to try to get out, I got to be careful in what I say, and that's me being that here.
The murders are so vast that I don't believe the Mexican Mafia understands the extent of the violence that's inflicted upon society and these multiple victims. I think that about 1,000 murder victims would be a fair number to estimate the Mexican Mafia being responsible for it. There have been murders of such magnitude that they've even shocked me. Recently, there was a family murdered, including a 6-month-old baby. They're called the Maxon Street murders.
It's actually the Maxon Road murders, and I just did a whole episode on that. If any of you are interested in knowing the story, the backstory about Maxon Road, it all starts with those hotel meetings where Widow Shy's sponsoring him. You remember the secret hotel meetings that I ran, that whole series? But the Maxon Road murders reverberated throughout the organization. This is one of the things that, like, gave the organization a black eye. I think what really made it didn't make it better, because, I mean, a whole family was lost, including 2 children. But I think the one thing that kind of soothed the public's mind was that Chato Sandoval uh, took care of what he took care of in San Quentin with Jimmy Palma. I think everybody just heaved a sigh of relief, like, yeah, that's done. And there are, I don't think there's a person in the world that will say like that was wrong to do, and it is wrong. I know that's wrong. Who are we to judge and say this person goes or that person goes? Nobody should have that ability or that right to do that. Uh, but that was a good call, and I think that's the only thing that assuaged the uh, the feelings of the public in terms of the Mexican Mafia having participated, or the perception that the Mexican Mafia had participated in the elimination of a family, including two children.
They're ordered by one specific individual by the name of Widow Shryak. They murdered a 6-month-old baby, a 5-year-old kid, and the mother. This is pretty shocking, even to all the members of the Mexican Mafia. But this is just one example. There have been individuals that have fingers cut off.
Let me clarify that real quick, because from outward appearances it says that by my own videotape it says they were ordered by Wedoshai Shryak. Let's clarify that Wedoshai Shryak ordered the elimination of Dido or Dido or Dodo or whatever the hell his name was. Everybody's critiquing me. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that guy was a drop off of the Mexican Mafia. He was from Hicks or Hayes, one of those two gangs, and that was a legit hit. And the other guy, Crucito from Norwalk, he was a legit hit. Even the woman was a legit hit. Widow Shy ordered the specific elimination of Dido or Dido, however you choose to pronounce
That
it.
have their fingers broken, that are beaten severely. The violence is not solely physical violence. The violence extends to domestic terrorism. The Mexican Mafia controls whole communities with the threat of violence. And, it's so brutal. The grandiosity and the audacity of the
I think that phrase right there, domestic terrorism. Domestic terrorism. This was right after 9/11, and these words were huge uh, in terms of the administration, right? Because if you really look at it, right? If you look at the situation, I mean, the huge focus was on Al Qaeda and the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and a lot of the resources went that way. A lot of the resources in the United States government went to combating terrorism, right? And if you look at who poses a bigger threat to your way of life, I mean, just really simple. Look at where you live, what you do. Is it Al Qaeda and other terrorist groups, or is it street gangs and crime that pose a threat to your way of life? I dare say that being the victim of a crime or street gangs and the distribution of illegal substances poses a bigger threat to us than any terrorist group, and it's claimed more lives than any terrorist group. You know, throughout the history of gangs and gang violence and substance abuse, a lot of people have fallen by the wayside. So one of the big pushes of the administration was to declare groups, and it is now. It is now as well. You've seen that a resurgence of that with MS-13 and a couple other gangs that have been declared transnational terrorist organizations, including cartels, 18th Street, and MS-13, right? But back in the day, this was just getting off the ground. And you're hearing the phrase out of my mouth right there, domestic terrorism, right? In fact, I wrote a book called Urban Street Terrorism, right? And this is what we're talking about. It's real. I mean, the Mexican Mafia controls entire neighborhoods. Communities are in fear. And that's the truth. That's the truth. They're not boogeymen. You know, they're going to mess with civilians. They don't. That's the one thing about the organization. They don't mess with civilians. They don't hurt kids. They don't target family members. There's still this moral fiber that runs through the organization. But make no mistake, there are terrorists. And at some point, the administration will declare anybody linked to a transnational criminal organization like a cartel or something like that and associated with these groups, and they can be targeted under the new federal guidelines. But this happened long ago. This is not a new thing. This started kicking off after 9/11, and it's starting to roll now under the Trump administration. It is
The
starting
Mafia knows no limitations. They specifically seek to shock society, to shock the individuals that they're seeking to control with violence. There are quite a few conspiracies that I was involved in, were just amazingly shocking.
So it's the goal of the Mexican Mafia to instill fear into people with these acts of violence?
We understand that fear translates to finances. If people fear us, if people fear the Mexican Mafia and its violence, we can convert that into cash.
Let's go back and talk about inside a prison. I know that over the years there's been prison officials have allowed different races of inmates to talk to try to bring peace between them. They call these peace talks. When the Mexican Mafia indulges in these peace talks, or they participate in them, do they have a sincere, are they sincere about wanting peace?
Well, I was involved in the peace talks of 2000, February 23rd riots. We were afforded the opportunity to engage in peace talks and walk throughout the prison and discuss these peace talks. And the bulk of our conversation had to do with Mexican Mafia business. We discussed who was on the lista. The lista means list, and the list means hit list. For the Mexican Mafia, we have a hit list of individuals who are in disfavor with the organization. They're targeted for murder. What we did was we established the lista and inspired. To answer your question in one word, no, the Mexican Mafia is not sincere. Only as it can further their interests.
So, you remember the piece I just did on Death Row Joe? And in that was a directive from Skip Villanueva. Said they would coexist only as long as it served the purpose of the organization. And that's the position of the Nuestra Familia now. They don't consider it peace. So even in this process, because the Mexican Mafia didn't need peace, there's nobody that, and I say this wholeheartedly and I mean it, there's nobody that could give the Mexican Mafia a run for its money. It's vast, with tens of thousands of soldiers in the CDCR, and the carnales insinuated in the Hispanic gang subculture the way they are. Nobody can really combat the organization. So the Mexican Mafia didn't campaign for peace, but rather an attempt to organize and benefit from a ceasing of hostilities. And so did the NF and the BGF and the AB, because each one independently is a powerhouse. Not so much the BGF anymore, but the AB and the NF are powerhouses. They've been well established. They have a long history of violence. They're highly organized. But the objectives of each organization was not peace. It was to get out of the shoe. And that's where we thought we were going in the 2000 peace talks when they let us walk throughout Pelican Bay State Prison. It was like, what can we get out of this? We have something on the table that we can offer that nobody else can do. That's stop violence in the state of California. And the Mexican Mafia did that with the AB, the Nuestra Familia. There have been isolated incidents where, north, south, black, white, Mexican, black, but they've been quelled. It's been contained. They've got to give them their credit. They've adhered to that agreement. And that's what we were going to do when we were in the peace talks. But at that time, it was an extremely conservative administration. I forgot who the director of corrections was at the time. But it was an extremely, extremely conservative administration. In fact, we dealt with Senator Tom Hayden, Senator Palanco, and the deputy director at the time was Brian Perry, good friend of mine. And he saw right through us. And he advised the director to shut it down, as well as the senators' offices that were involved in the peace talks. But the whole objective was just to get out there and do what we could, right? We knew it wouldn't last forever. We'd go out there. Our primary objective in those peace talks, we were actually going to eliminate Cuate Grajeda right there on the table in front of Warden Bob Ayers, the assistant director, or deputy director, Brian Perry, and the senatorial staff that attended those peace talks. We were going to lay them out on the table in the classification room because there's no gun coverage there. It's in the main corridor in D facility. And myself, Danny Pina, and Chaco Padilla were going to do that. I'm going to do an episode on that, but that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to do it until Chaco punked out. He literally punked out, right? But it helped the organization during those peace talks achieve so much. Like Cuate Grajeda was running rampant. Angel Valencia was running rampant with their politics and their little clique that they started with Tigre and Tablas. They were running rampant. And as soon as we were able to go out there and talk to everybody, we solidified our lista, which was Angel, Cuate. Angel and Cuate were our primary targets. And Chino Delgadillo was another one. David Delgadillo was another one. Because he was part of that too. But that's really what we were doing. We were conspiring, passing substances and kites and forming a lista and trying to quell all the internal fighting that was going on. AB did the same. The NF did not participate. They refused to participate in those peace talks that I'm talking about here in this segment of the video.
In fact, there was quite a big conspiracy that occurred during those peace talks in which individuals were specifically targeted for murder, and there was the intent of the Mexican Mafia to kill these individuals in front of the warden himself. And that's the audacity of the Mexican Mafia that I was speaking of. They wanted this to be a graphic murder, to shock the conscience of the prison population and society, to make an example of specific individuals. And the Mexican Mafia has no sincere humanistic concerns. It doesn't seek peace. It seeks control. That's all it seeks.
And peace really doesn't fit into them controlling people by fear.
It doesn't.
Okay. Conspiracies. Rene, are you aware of any conspiracies that the Mexican Mafia that he has going, that either exist right now or have existed in the past?
Well, there were the peace talk plots to hit Angel Valencia and Daniel Grajeda. We had anticipated...
Who are these guys?
These are Mexican Mafia members who had fell into disfavor with the organization for political reasons. We were going to stab Angel Valencia in front of the warden himself, and we had hoped to stab Daniel Grajeda on the tier during the rounds which were discussing peace among the other individuals in the pods. But this was one of the more graphic instances where we had conspired to brutally murder individuals for a statement, to make a statement. Another one was the Bat Marquez hit exchange. During that out-to-court trip, and Bat Marquez is a high-ranking Mexican Mafia member who is currently wanted by the FBI, and he's on the 10 most wanted list. He's currently living in Mexico.
Yeah, that was kind of crazy. Bat took my crew down to Mexico. I saw Bat on the bus in 1995 when we went down for the first RICO trial in U.S. versus Alex Aguirre and Raymond Triac et al. That first RICO. We all got subpoenaed down there, 13 members, a couple of camaradas, and we got on this bus. We were able to sit around and talk. They let us move from chair to chair, and all the cardenas were talking with each other. And Bat says, look, send some of your homeboys down there, and we'll give you a large amount of product. And what you can do is, when I need somebody to be eliminated, we'll get some guys to come down from your area, and they can do it, and they'll get paid. And then when you guys need somebody to be eliminated, we'll send somebody from over here in Mexico to go do it. And this was a righteous thing. In fact, Popeye Barron and Bat Marquez are the first guys that did this with their hood. Logan, Red Steps, they would take guys over there. And they would do work, like real work. This was not a joke. If people may discount this, like, no, that never happened, but it's documented. This is the real deal. They were dealing with the Adriano Felix organization, and they were really putting in serious work. But this was when right after we went to the bus and I think 2 years previously, a year previously, my crew went down there to Mexico to stay with Bat, and he offered to provide me with product in quantities so large that I couldn't handle them. The fear was this. This is my fear. It's hard enough running a crew, but you're isolated in the maximum security prison 1,000 miles from your home, and you have very infrequent communication, right? How could I accept responsibility for such a vast amount of product, and then if it comes up missing, somebody gets busted, they got to be paid? That would fall on my head. And dealing with those organizations, somebody else might be held responsible that was not responsible, and I didn't want to take on that burden. I didn't want to take on that responsibility, so I declined. Here we go.
He has extensive resources at his disposal, and he had discussed work. He had discussed creating a hit exchange where United States Mexican Mafia members would go over to Mexico to do hits for the Mexican cartels, and then when the Mexican Mafia needed hits in the United States, Mexican nationals would come over and do the hits over here. This is being implemented. It's not a past conspiracy, it's a current conspiracy. There was also a past conspiracy called Operation Wildebeest. This was effectuated by Tupi Hernandez, who's a Mexican Mafia member, Babo Castellanos, who was a Mexican Mafia member, and Philip Chano Chavez, who was deceased. He was murdered by the Mexican Mafia. In San Bernardino County Jail, while they were housed there, they utilized the telephones to extort individuals housed in the general population while they were housed in administrative segregation. They'd have individuals on the main line take these Mexican nationals and drug dealers hostage in their...
Let me stop that right here. Because I remember being housed with Tupi, and he was breaking all this down to me, right? Operation Wildebeest. Like Wildebeest. You don't have the migration every year in the Serengeti where tens of thousands of maybe millions of freaking wildebeests and animals migrate. So I thought, well, why'd you call it Operation Wildebeest? And because they would take these what they call whales, right? Big drug dealers, and they would hold them hostage in the county jail at knife point, whatever, tie them up, beat them up, and they would tell them, look, you're going to sign over a boat, a car, a home, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 cash, and we're going to stay right here with you, and you're going to get on the phone, and if it's not done right now, you're going to get whacked. And they would do it. And so I tell Doopy, I said, well, why wildebeest, right? He says, because it's always the dumb wildebeest that doesn't cross with the herd, that's by itself, that gets eaten by the crocodiles. And he says, so there's always a dumb dealer or a baller that comes into the jail and flosses. We'd see it in the newspapers, and we talked to them about it, and they'd brag about their Bentleys or whatever they had, Mercedes-Benz. And it's those guys that they would get, the dumb ones that stuck out from the herd. And that's why they called it Operation Wildebeest.
Modules and hold them hostage until they placed a phone call to their relatives and extorted money from these individuals' families. And they were very lucrative in terms of their endeavors. I mean, they profited real well.
So inside a prison, Mexican Mafia members were taking these Mexican nationals hostage, and then they would call the family, and they'd tell the family, if you want these people to live, you'll send money.
They would have them at night point on the phone, and they'd have the individual who was hostage tell the family, they have me transfer $10,000 to this person, and they'll call back in 10 minutes to that person. If the money's not there, I'm going to be killed. Or a half hour, well, however long it took to effectuate the transfer of money, or boats, or cars, or anything of value. They took quite a few objects which were later sold. And they would do this to a woman named Charlene Chavez. This is John Chavez's wife, and ultimately the cause of his death. But she would collect the money for them. And
Yeah, Charlene. Charlene was a piece of work. In fact, I found out while I was in D6. I moved in to the pod with Jaco Tonito Lopez, the one that got eliminated in Calipatria. Chano Chavez. There was the four of us there, and it was then that Jaco told me that Charlene had saw me on a news program. I didn't participate in the interview, but Chris Blatchford was doing this coverage on me while I was in court, and she started throwing out the word rat in PC about me, and I remember I was upset, and Chano came and apologized. He said he talked to her, and that she would never do it again, and that was it. But Charlene was deeply involved in Mexican Mafia politics. We might do an episode on that whole fiasco there, and we'll let you know who Charlene is and who she hooked up with and how many Mexican Mafia members she was sending money to. But she was a piece of work, and that's the woman who was in charge of
society. She was their party on the streets which collected the money. Well-known Mexican Mafia woman affiliate. And this was done for years there. Years.
Okay. Was you ever aware of a conspiracy to kill the California governor?
I was apprised of a situation in which the Guate camp had plotted on Pete Wilson for his anti-immigration stance and legislation, the Proposition 187. There was discussions in the Mexican Mafia to assassinate Pete Wilson.
Okay. Are you aware of an existing conspiracy?
So, that Governor Pete Wilson, remember he was a Democratic mayor in San Diego. Then he ran for governor and became a Republican. And part of his platform was immigration. Remember the commercials they show Mexicans running across the border, and all the political propaganda that went behind Proposition 187? Well, there was a certain Cardenal, David Delgadillo, who came up with this idea. In fact, it's his story, right? It's his story that there was a real conspiracy to eliminate the governor. And this was heavily investigated because when I debriefed, Chino was debriefing, and Angel were debriefing. Like 60 years of Mexican Mafia, 65 years of Mexican Mafia membership were debriefing at one time. And all this stuff was pouring out of each carnal. Each carnal has his own subjective experience, and Chino was telling his. And this is one of the things that emerged through Chino. He told me about it, right? That they had some 22 rimfire rounds, and they wanted to eliminate Pete Wilson. I don't know the extent to which the conspiracy progressed. I just know that some people talked about it.
Assault families by the Mexican Mafia.
I am intimately aware with that conspiracy. As a matter of fact, my wife was recently targeted for murder and voted upon by the Mexican Mafia. I was recently informed of this during a trip to Pelican Bay. I'm familiar with this novel concept, and this is a departure from the norm, actually. In the past, the Mexican Mafia wouldn't assault family members. And I believe this is a desperation attempt by the Mexican Mafia to regain control of some of the defectors. It's not unlike the Mexican Mafia to use these brutal tactics, though, because, as I said, they implemented the plot against the Maxon Street family.
So let me stop this right here. This is a person that was a secretary of mine who I had married. And at this time, the Cuate and Angel camp and the Tablas Castellano camp came up with a concept to eliminate family members. This is real. This is real. That's also the time when they started sending kites out to the main lines. When they put somebody on the lista, they would say, disregard him, don't do anything for him. And this was never done in the organization. A lot of stuff was happening. These talks really took place among carnales to take out family members if they couldn't get to the carnal, which was crazy. It was crazy, right? And it's one of the reasons that led to my departure from the organization. That and a few other reasons, right? But it got to the point where it's this kind of political infighting where carnales were targeting people just to target them. I mean, Pelican Bay Shoe was so effective that the organization was at war with itself. Had they left the organization there for another 10 years in the short corridor, it would have been defunct. Those guys couldn't communicate. They couldn't do visits. People were dropping left and right. Nobody got killed in all of that. Nobody was eliminated in that entire war. Nobody. It was a war of words, but it was the most damaging thing to the organization ever. I had never seen it that bad, and it's what drove me to drop out. With friends like that, with brothers like that, who needs enemies? Where every day they're plotting on this, they're plotting on that, they don't like you, and it's a bunch of disgruntled people. And if you think it's changed any, like the leopard changes its spots, no. The organization is still based on that. They're still eliminating each other. The only people that eliminate carnales are carnales. And their downfall is the infighting and the lack of hierarchical structure, like a centralized leadership. But this still exists today. Not the threat to families. We quashed that immediately. And we might do a story on that. Like, this is bringing up so much stuff that I have forgotten.
And we're in 5 of those individuals, including the baby, the 6-month-old baby. So it's not unheard of. It's just novel.
So the reason for this conspiracy is they're trying to scare other members and associates into not defecting.
Exactly. And they're going to take drastic measures in effort to prevent that. There are some radical thinkers in the Mexican Mafia who will effectuate these types of plots. We have to remember these aren't the Cub Scouts here. These are all brutal murderers, and they'll do drastic crimes. They'll commit drastic crimes in order to further their interests. And I think that defectors is one of the problems right now, and they want to curtail these defections.
Okay. Would it be accurate to say, Rene, that there are several conspiracies that exist right now among Mexican Mafia members to murder people inside of prison and on the streets?
You have to understand that each individual member is akin to a godfather in his crew. He is the CEO of his crew. And he directs multiple conspiracies, multiple crimes, and he has a crime wave onto society himself from prison. And this just comprises the individuals who are in prison. There are multiple individuals on the streets. And I think it would be fair to say that there are multiple conspiracies that I know of to murder individuals in prison, and multiple conspiracies in society to murder citizens.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about money. The inmate trust accounts inside of the Department of Corrections. These trust accounts are used for inmates to put money on their books so they can buy canteen and things that they need. Are you aware of the Mexican Mafia using the trust account system for anything other than its intended use?
Yes. I personally utilize...
Yeah, we're going to cut out right there, folks, because that's a whole other story right there. I hope you've enjoyed this segment of the debrief. It is my pleasure to go back over it. It just refreshes my memory so much. And it just gives me ideas for content and episodes that will spin off of this. But But like I said, I wanted to bring you my debrief, my words from me, right? Rather than somebody posting it and just running the video and nobody knows. There's no context to it, right? So you hear something and there's no context to it. It's one-dimensional, right? Two-dimensional. Well, we want to make it three-dimensional. We want you to listen to the debrief and hear me explain what I'm talking about. And we're going to continue doing this. We got a couple more segments to go. Unfortunately, that's all I have of this debrief. But we'll try to acquire more. There's some more out there for other agencies, and hopefully we'll be able to get them. With that said, folks, as always, like and subscribe to the channel. Hit that hype button. We did a long episode for you today. Hope you appreciate it. Mondays, we always kick it off right. You know that. Tomorrow, we're going to have a smoker as well. With that said, you guys have a wonderful day. And I hope you enjoyed your 4th of July. I did. I had a blast. And as always, stay safe out there.
This is
I'm out.
Rene
Peace.
Enriquez. Nickname Bootser.